Hello, I'm Jenny Ferd and welcome to my library. I am a chaotic neutral mechanical engineer who's really into permaculture and wants to talk about books. So let's talk about books. Today I am here to start a reading vlog, and it is a focused reading vlog on the topic of math and physics. I posted a video a while back that was titled "We Need More Books About Math," and it was about the idea of reading more fiction books that are math and physics focused. I got some recommendations in the comments. Also, I got a wonderful reception to that video. Thank you so much, those of y'all who subscribed due to that video. This video is for you, and for the people who commented. I'm so appreciative that that struck such a chord with everybody because it is such an important topic to me. I have a list of books recommended in the comments. One I am so interested in, and that is Black Hole Survival Guide by Janna Levin. It is not offered by my library, so I will need to figure out how to get it in some other way, probably buying it used. There's also a handful of books by Carlo Rovelli, which I do have offered through my library, and I have checked some out. I have checked out There Are Places in the World Where Rules Are Less Important Than Kindness, and Other Thoughts on Physics, Philosophy, and the World. So this is more about tying physics concepts and the stories behind physics into the world and philosophies. So I've been enjoying that. I am reading that at night, and I'm not super far into it because it's basically like when I'm super anxietied out of my brain, I read that, and so I'm 13% through. There is another book that I'm reading currently by Carlo Rovelli, and that is Reality Is Not What It Seems: The Journey to Quantum Gravity, and I am loving this. I've been reading this as an audiobook while I am gardening and while I've been mowing the lawn and stuff, and it's been really good. I had read Carlo Rovelli's book 7 Brief Lessons in Physics, and it was so short and so brief that I was a little bit disappointed in it, to be honest. And this is really hitting a more significant chord with me because it is the more drawn out book that he wanted to write, I suppose. So I'm really enjoying it. Two other books that my library also has, that is The Order of Time and Helgoland. So I have placed those books on hold as well. Additionally recommended is The Library of Babel by Jorge Luis Borges. And that is not offered through my library either, which I'm actually quite surprised by because I've heard of that one quite a lot. There's also Project Hail Mary, which is offered by my library, and An Inheritance of Magic, which is not offered through my library. Then there is something so insane, and which I did not think I would read ever, and that is The Way of Kings in the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. It is 45 hours long, but I've placed it on hold. I have never really had a desire to read Brandon Sanderson, and yet it has been recommended as a book that contains math and physics in a fiction set. So as I mentioned already, I am reading some Carlo Rovelli books, and I am really enjoying them. They are nonfiction. They are not fiction, but there is something about physics concepts that gets the mind going in such an imaginative way. Just conceptualizing curved space and the idea of, if you imagine yourself on a sphere and you imagine yourself walking in a straight line, then you can go back to the same place that you had been before, and that if you are in space, the same thing can happen in space. Those ideas really put you in an imaginative place. I've been enjoying that quite a lot. Now, I guess for more of the vlog bit of it, and less the topic of the vlog, it is springtime. I have flowers on my seed-grown fruit trees. We moved into this house in 2020, and I started planting trees from seed. And this year, I have flowers on so many of them, which means hopefully I will get fruit on so many of them, and I will be able to taste the fruit of the unique trees that I've grown. I'm so excited. The other thing that I'm excited for is I got these Jean Paul Gaultier sunglasses. I have been wanting to wear sunglasses more in my life. I heard recently of somebody who had gotten melanoma inside their eye, and that really freaked me out. And I do have very pale eyes, and so the light is quite damaging to my eyes. So I now have some really cool sunglasses, and they are, you know, vintage Gaultier. So rad as fuck. Additionally, we are in the swing of things in spring. So I am doing radish harvests, greens harvests, and also planting. I just planted a whole bunch of potatoes that had gone a little, they've basically started growing in the pantry, so we put those outside. I have a lot of like prep work with the veggies, so those are the kinds of things that I've been up to. I have been reading books by Carlo Rovelli. I finished one and I thought it was so great that I ordered a physical copy. That was Reality is Not What It Seems: The Journey to Quantum Gravity by Carlo Rovelli. Previously, I read 7 Brief Lessons in Physics by Carlo Rovelli, and I really didn't think that much of it, to be perfectly honest. It didn't leave a huge impression on me. It was very short, and I feel like it just wasn't enough to like sink into. Now with Reality is Not What It Seems, there's this wonderful historical context. And so it's this weaving of history and the figures who made these leaps in thinking and who proved these things to be true about how the world works, or at least to be truer than previous conceptions. And then he gets to a point that's like, all right, this is what everybody agrees on. Now let's talk about the weird shit, which is basically quantum gravity. And I haven't really heard a ton about this concept, quantum gravity, and I'm assuming that's because I wasn't a theoretical physicist. I was a mechanical engineer in college, so I learned like mechanical physics, like how to build a bridge and how to shoot things into space. We learned like some more advanced physics, but not like a ton. This whole idea of everything in the universe having something finite about it, I think I just never really considered. I don't know. We were taught the concept of infinity as children, and we're like, space is infinite, taking things into infinite pieces. And then you learn about like atoms and stuff, and you're like, okay, we're not gonna like take things apart into infinite pieces. There are finite pieces, but we didn't really learn about like finite space or the impact on time that this idea has is very interesting. And I do think I would need to read through those later chapters again to just kind of like get back into it a little bit and like kind of think about it a little bit more. I am now reading another book by him, and it is called Helgoland, I believe, which it's named after an island where Heisenberg made fundamental breakthroughs in quantum mechanics. And this is a book all about quantum mechanics and quantum theory. So I'm really, really getting into it, I guess. He writes in a way that is so absorbable though, and it's really nice. It's really nice to not feel like a dumb idiot child when reading about physics concepts. I have written a science fiction novella that kind of explores the idea of wormholes, but I decided to do it in a more like artistic way because I was like, oh, okay, I gotta read up on the actual like mathematical basis for wormholes, like how they solve a problem, and like I'm gonna have to learn all of this physics about it. I really thought this, and then I was like, I'm just gonna write a book. And it'll be informed by like the experience of being a university student in a technical field. It doesn't really have to have that fundamental physical basis. This is my opinion. But now I'm thinking about like quantized space and like how I could bring in that kind of idea into it. I don't know. It's like really broadening my thoughts. I don't even know if wormholes work with this theory. I have no idea. I have also been reading Red Mars, which wasn't a recommendation for anybody, and so far it has way more to do with interpersonal dynamics than it does about like physics or math concepts. But I am reading a sci-fi, I guess. So I have an update to give on my math and physics recommendation reading. I finished reading Helgoland, which is another book by Carlo Rovelli. This was about kind of the history and consequences of quantum theory. So it just had a lot to do with the initial thoughts around quantum mechanics and what it means and its implications. I have to be honest, I don't think now I can parse in my memory what came from this book, Reality is Not What It Seems, and what came from Helgoland in terms of my understanding of quantum mechanics and the history of certain physics concepts. I think Helgoland was a lot more like philosophical and introspective and also more focused on quantum mechanics compared to Reality is Not What It Seems, which goes through a historical context of really important physics breakthroughs and then dives into quantum gravity and the implications of that. I think Helgoland was a pretty decent book, a decent introduction, but in my opinion, Reality is Not What It Seems was overall a better structure for me. I feel like it really got me thinking quite a bit. Carlo Rovelli is really good at taking these really complicated concepts and making you feel like you can kind of understand what's going on, and also that if you don't understand what's going on, that's totally fine. He's a physics writer that is really friendly, and you also learn quite a lot from him. So I've been really enjoying his work. I just got another book from the library from him. Just came in from Hold. And that is The Order of Time. And I think I will like this quite a lot because I do really like conceptualizing time. Gordon, why are you screaming? The Order of Time book is also quite short, so not a huge commitment. I will say Helgoland does mention very specifically the Red Mars books and how one of the characters is very inspired by a real-life physicist. It's all coming together. I finished a book, another one, by Carlo Rovelli, and I don't think I've updated y'all, and it's been a few days, probably. It was very good. I haven't ordered a copy. There's a handful of books that I really want to pick up. I don't know, I'm just kind of putting it off, because I did pick up Reality is Not What It Seems right away, just because I thought it was so compelling. And this was called The Order of Time. All about time, the concept of time, what does time mean when we're talking about our current understanding of physics. It was so cool. Very short book and enlightening. We think of time as like a very structured, rigid, inflexible thing, right? We have a standard. Gravity affects time. Speed affects time. Like, we know these things. It's really hard to disengage from your former perception of like the rigid, universal time and have this much more flexible, relative time. How we recall things and the structure of our memory and how that influences our perception of what time is. It was just so compelling. I really, really enjoyed it. Reading or hearing about theoretical physics always gets the mind going in like such an inventive way. Yeah, I've just had a great time reading these physics books. My library really went hard on having 500 million Carlo Rovelli books, and I also went really hard in reading a bunch of the Carlo Rovelli books, but they were great. I have a couple more books that I kind of want to read in this, especially since the only thing I've read so far is books by Carlo Rovelli. And then, kind of as an aside, I've also read Red Mars, which was not a part of these suggestions, but was just something that I was reading at the same time, that also has like a lot of like scientific concepts, but not really a part of this whole thing. The lighting is very green, and I think it's literally because my garden is so verdant right now. So it is a Sunday, and I was sitting down to edit one of my videos. So I went to edit this physics and math recommendation reading vlog. I knew that I had only read Carlo Rovelli books. I knew this because that's what my library offered, and I actually got a rental from my library, finally. This is like months later of Project Hail Mary, and I have started reading it. The thing is, I would love to tack on some other math and physics recommendations to this video, because that was the whole dream from the beginning. I mentioned some books that sound really good. So one of those is Black Hole Survival Guide by Janna Levin. I just got this book on Audible. It's a really short book. I'm gonna do some dishes, listen to this book, and hopefully we'll have read this book by the time I'm done doing my dishes, because I would love to give you guys just a little bit more variety in the reading. I had a wonderful time, as you can tell from everything I said before, reading all of those Carlo Rovelli books, but I really wanted to expand the diversity of my math and physics reading. I also have to say I did get in the hold for The Way of Kings, and I am so deeply uninterested in reading that I gave it back. I just gave it back. I really don't want to commit that much of my time to that book. Let's go do some dishes. Let's read a book. It is now basically summer. It's June. We're like in the dry season now. So it's like a whole different vibe now than it was when I started this video, which was quite a long time ago. Hello, it is later in the day, and I have just finished reading Black Hole Survival Guide by Janna Levin. Really enjoyed this. This is a book, nonfiction, all about the physics surrounding black holes. It introduces the various topics that you would need through the framework of imagine yourself as somebody who is near a black hole. There's these like hypothetical scenarios. I did really enjoy that. And also I thought the explanations of like the physics background and the physics phenomena necessary for this book were quite good. I was slightly expecting it to be in more of a guidebook tone and to be like slightly more conversational, fantastical, story based around this idea of it being a guidebook. Instead, it was very much still a relatively cut and dry nonfiction physics book. This was not super inventive, but it was very clear at explanations and did a great job of using metaphors and different ways of explaining concepts. In case you thought that it might be an actual, like, kind of fun, kind of kooky survival guide, it is not. So I guess I am just the slightest bit disappointed because I was hoping this book would be a little bit of a different tone than the other physics books that I read by Carlo Rovelli. And it definitely had a different voice. It is a different author, and it's a topic centered around this black hole idea. So there were significant differences on that front, but ultimately it is a non-fiction physics book. So the last book that I have remaining for this vlog is the rental that I finally got from my library, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I have 13 days left to read this. I'm hoping I can read it quicker than that because I do want to close out this video. Wish me luck. I just finished reading Project Hail Mary. First of all, I just have to say, I had such a blast in the ending of that book. I didn't realize how kind of like goofy this book was gonna get, because when I read The Martian, I felt like it was like a relatively serious, realistic book. And this one is just kind of a bit of a goofy science math nerd book. I had a really good time, and I do think this is an excellent example of a fictional story that really highlights the use of math. It doesn't go into like mathematical concepts, but there is practical utilization of math, a ton of exploration of scientific concepts and physics concepts. You genuinely learn stuff about physics if you have no base knowledge. Like if I were like a junior in high school and I read this, I would actually be learning some physics. So that's really cool. Plot-wise and story-wise, it was really fun. It was a little bit of a long story for me because I did feel like it dragged just a little bit in the middle, just a little bit too long for my preferences, but it does really pick up at the end in a way that I enjoyed a lot. We have a man who's cranky. We have a cranky old man. It's about a science teacher who gets involved in this big effort put on by the scientists of the Earth. I don't want to talk too much about what actually happens because you do start in this state of not knowing what the heck is going on. And so a lot of the joy of the book is exploring with the main character what is happening, because he basically wakes up and he is on a spaceship. He's the only one alive and he doesn't know what's happening. To wrap it up, the recommendations that I read from were books in general by Carlo Rovelli, and I so enjoyed that. I also love that my library offered so many books by Carlo Rovelli because I got to explore his works besides 7 Brief Lessons on Physics, which I didn't actually enjoy that much. And I got to explore these 2 books that I really loved, which I now have. Rovelli. Should be somewhere over here. There it is. I already showed you my copy of Reality Is Not What It Seems, but since then I also picked up The Order of Time, which I also just really enjoyed. I also read Black Hole Survival Guide by Janna Levin. I thought it was a really wonderful non-fiction physics book, explored in a way that is accessible to almost anybody, and it does expose you to physics concepts that you may not have explored before. And then this last book that I just read, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, was so fun, especially as a mechanical engineer. It has a lot of really fun mechanical engineering aspects to the story, but also in general for people who love math, physics, and science in general. There's wonderful explorations of applied mathematics, the scientific method, and actually using science and then also applied physics concepts. So it was super, super fun, and it was a wonderful recommendation. So I appreciate everybody who left comments on that video and all of your really well thought out recommendations. I did thoroughly enjoy exploring these books with all of you, and it was a valuable addition to my reading experience for this year. So I really appreciate all of your input from that previous video. If you do happen to have more recommendations that are super math focused, I would love to hear those recommendations, because I did explore a lot of very physics focused work. I would be interested in nonfiction math and fiction math, and more of books along the line of like Flatland and stuff like that. If you have any recommendations, I'd really appreciate that. If you enjoyed this and you think that a friend would also enjoy watching this, please consider sharing it with that friend. Consider liking and subscribing, and I will be back again soon.